Hello everyone. This video is going to look a bit different than the previous few I've posted. While I love my long form videos and plan to release a lot of them, I may not be able to do that every month, be it because I'm busy or just because the video is going to be a longer one, or both. I'm going to try for monthly uploads with a new type of video, just a short analysis of something that happened in the most recent MCC. And I know I just recently released a video, so I didn't have to do this now, but this video felt inevitable. Every time Ace Race is played, people complain about the Tridents, so I'm bound to use this as a topic at some point, and if I'm going to do it, why not do it now? The next event is Twitch Rivals, which has a lot of newcomers, and if it's anything like the last one, it's going to have Ace Race. A lot of people are going to have a lot to learn about Ace Race's Tridents. Now these Tridents, despite looking normal at first glance, are not normal Tridents, and I'll give a brief history lesson as to why they're like this. Before Ace Race, there was Foot Race, which was not a great game. It was a really short game, only 2 laps, and thank goodness for that, because not only were there no interesting movement elements like Elytra or Tridents, but punching was enabled. This gave a massive advantage to people who pulled ahead early, as they could easily coast their way to a top placement, while the rest of the pack struggled in a storm of punches. In MCC 6, in the last Foot Race ever, Pizza Hut got first. That is not shocking whatsoever, but the margin of victory was. Pete beat second place by nearly 30 seconds, in a 3-minute race. A group of MCC nerds have done a lot of calculations, and statistically speaking, this may be the best single game performance of all time. But this is not a fun or fair game, so when it was replaced with Ace Race, punching was removed and so the problem was solved. For about a year. Then a new map was introduced, and Ace Race began experiencing the same problems Foot Race did. The top spots were getting huge breakaways, and people stuck in the middle of the pack were getting frustrated. The culprit this time was the Tridents. Clouds and Python's Crypt, the first 2 Ace Race maps, were similar in that they did not often require the Trident, and when they did, it was often from a large body of water that it could be used. But Space Race was different. Space Race saw increased Trident use, especially at the beginning of the lap, and much smaller areas to launch to or from. As a result, players would often collide with each other while using the Trident, which stops them in their tracks. A change needed to be made. So in MCC 16, the Nox crew introduced the custom Trident. Removing player collision wasn't the only new thing about this Trident though. It also automatically fires after a second of charging rather than when you release your mouse. Additionally, you can begin charging it before you enter the water. The pre-charging is a nice little bonus to have, but what about the auto fire? Couldn't that just mess people up? Why did the Nox crew choose to implement that? The answer is ping. If players could launch themselves whenever they'd like, there would be a delay between when they let go of right click and when they were actually launched. If you watch a player with high ping and compare the Tridents to the red jump pads, which use a similar launching mechanism, you'll notice that this actually has a huge difference. Although the autofire would occasionally throw people off, the Nox crew ultimately decided that the benefits of it outweighed the drawbacks. And with that, Ace Race's problems were solved. For about a year. Then Ace Race received a major overhaul. It was completely recoded and every old map got retired, so a new one was made. It was very compact, as it had to be to accommodate the changes in Ace Race's mechanics. And wouldn't you know it, one of the areas changed was the Tridents. It was a simple change really, just a reduction in the launching distance. It wasn't that big of a deal. Until a new map was released. These new maps had a lot of alternate routes, and players had identified many potential shortcuts in preparation for the second race on Yeti Set Go. But one of them wound up being very difficult. Players were trying to Trident from the water up into this cave. They were not very successful. Most of the time, it seemed like the Trident was just too weak to get them there. But it could get them there. It happened a few times. Antfrost, who had the misfortune to go 0 for 4, could not get this out of his head. He needed answers. And shortly thereafter, he would get them. The day after MCC 29, Daniel Altum would appear in Antfrost's chat to discuss the Tridents. Here's what he revealed. The Tridents do not use normal Riptide mechanics. Instead, the custom launch has its own unique physics. Physics that the players have already learned to exploit. Players have known for years now that jumping at the beginning of grid runners gives a farther launch. The reason for this is that touching a solid surface, such as the ground, will produce drag and that'll slow you down. But it's not just solid surfaces. Water also produces drag, and that's why the Tridents give players so much trouble. And drag will stack. For each tick you're in the water, you'll experience drag. This means that unlike regular tridents, which only give a small penalty to launching while submerged, the custom launch shrinks drastically the deeper you are in the water. There's also another aspect that needs to be addressed: Dolphin's Grace. This is why the old custom tridents seemed a lot more reliable than the new ones, despite the only difference being the launch strength. Dolphin's Grace, which was always active during old Ace Race, greatly reduces drag in water. In new Ace Race, however, Dolphin's Grace has never been granted alongside the trident. This makes the trident appear very inconsistent, especially to people who don't know how it works. Needless to say, the number of complaints about the tridents have drastically increased over the past year, although that's also in part thanks to the introduction of Clouds 2. Clouds 2 is not only more trident heavy than the other two maps, but notably features multiple trident shortcuts that have become the most popular route. These shortcuts are attempted often and failed often, so there's lots of time to be gained or lost with the trident. And if you're going to rely on something as finicky as the trident, you're going to want to find a consistent setup. Let's look at an example. This skip on the S-bend near the beginning of the course is very commonly done, but launching up to this green jump pad can be pretty difficult. In MCC 33, Fruitberries had a solution. By standing in this singular block of 1 block deep water, you can guarantee that you'll reach the green pad platform. That is not the fastest route, however. It's possible to launch from the water all the way up to the stone platform, saving over a second. Purpled went for this last event, so let's see how he did compared to Ampfrost, who used the safe method. Purpled makes 2 consecutive mistakes on the first lap, which puts him into an early deficit. He then makes it up to the green pad, which he would repeat on lap 2 without any mistakes. On lap 3 he finally gets the payoff, but it's not enough to make up for his previous mistakes, despite Ampfrost stumbling earlier in the section. Ultimately, Ampfrost and the safe method prevail. This kind of shortcut discipline is a very useful skill in Ace Race and extends beyond just tridents. Later in the lap, Ampfrost decides he wants to take risks. He goes for a shortcut up high that requires both a good trident launch and a 4-block jump. He hits them both on the first lap, then on the second lap sets what I believe to be the fastest split ever on that section. But on the third lap he makes a mistake. He fails the 4-block jump, costing more than enough time to crown Purpled and the Safe Route the winners of this section. That makes it 2-0 in favor of safety, and we're not done yet. It's about time that I mention Pizza Hut, the best ace racer in the event. Pete has very clean movement, especially with the trident, but he doesn't get ahead by using these skills on a bunch of crazy shortcuts. He actually takes less shortcuts than most top players. Since his movement's so clean, he gains time all throughout the course, so he doesn't need to take those risks. Abstaining often gains him time anyway when his competitors fail. With all that being said, I've yet to make my most important point, one that argues in favor of shortcuts. Shortcuts are fun. Showcasing your skills to gain an advantage is an amazing feeling. And I believe that one of the reasons people are perfectly happy to take the safe routes I've shown is because the safe routes are still shortcuts. Players still feel satisfaction from doing them. But not every shortcut will have an easy, consistent setup. One shortcut frequently gives even the strongest of players trouble, as there are plenty of ways to mishandle the trident. And there's one particularly notable clip where Purpled shows nearly all of them. He begins the section with a really good launch. Too good even, as now he's higher than usual in the second cube, and when he tries to launch, he's out of the water. If he kept holding down right click, he'd be launched when he got back into the water, but that's unintuitive because tridents don't work like that normally. He also could have let go of space to avoid going out of the water in the first place, but once again he did what's instinctual. Also instinctual is holding W, which once again causes him to exit the water before he can be launched. This time though, he falls back down to the ground. So now he has to start again from square one. He gets back up to the second cube, and then once again fails to launch. It's important to note that his teammate CPK was shouting about lag, and while I've never played Ace Race myself so I don't know exactly how this works, I suspect that the lag makes the tridents take a little bit longer to charge. Just long enough to cause Purpled, who is still acting as though this is a vanilla trident, to release right click before he's launched. He then decides to make an adjustment to prevent himself from going too far forward and falling out of the water cube like last time. But he's holding right click, so the autofire is going to launch him in the direction he's facing, which at this moment is downward. Now absolutely rattled, he hastily launches himself at too low of an angle to remain in the water cube, then on his next attempt repeats some earlier mistakes. Then finally, on his 5th attempt, he completes the shortcut. Failing a shortcut 4 times in one lap is so bad it's funny, but you won't be laughing if it happens to you, and it very well could. I don't think even a single player has a 100% success rate on this shortcut, because there's just so many ways it can go wrong. If you want to maximize your success rate here, you're gonna have to put some thought into it before the game. I know a lot of people already like to watch an ace race run prior to the event, but just watching isn't gonna cut it. You need to be attentive. Watch where they enter the water from and the angle that they launch. If they are successful, think about why that is, and if they're not, think about what they could have done differently. And don't just do this for this shortcut, but do it for anywhere you want to improve, because if you don't know why a mistake was made, you're doomed to repeat it. I finished covering all the key areas on clouds now, but there's still sections on the other maps that we can learn some valuable lessons from. Let's go back to Yeti Set Go and the shortcut that started this discussion in the first place. One of the things that baffled Antfrost was why every failed attempt had such a bad launch. Why did nobody ever barely not make it, and what was even the difference between the good and the bad launches? Let's take another look at the mechanics, cause Eltum said one more thing. As we learned, water produces drag, so the longer you remain in water during your launch, the less distance you'll get. You obviously want to trident closer to the water's surface to reduce the drag, but since you can only be launched when you're in the water, you'll never get zero drag. Or will you? Eltum revealed a trick. If you time it such that your trident fires in the water on the client side, but the server side launch occurs when you're outside the water, you'll get a perfect launch with zero drag. It's not the most difficult thing in the world to do, as Punz was able to go 2 for 3 with it in MCC 35. It's not the only option though, as Fruit found some 1 block deep water in MCC 29, and Pete's course record forgoes the shortcut entirely. A consistent perfect launch is still a good skill to have though, as it's required by the green pad skip we saw Purple do earlier, as well as a shortcut in Turtle Run. Speaking of Turtle Run, the alternate route introduced in MCC 30 has a few difficult elements, one of which also appears in Yeti Set Go. That would be the 1 block thick Bubble Vader, which, like the water cubes from clouds, often sees players wait too long to launch, try doing so when they're out of the water, then fall out before they can try again because they're holding W. Exclusive to Turtle Run is half block deep water, which gives players trouble if they try to use the trident as if it was vanilla. Holding space in water that's shallow means you'll spend a good portion of your time outside the water, so if you release right click when you expect your trident to launch, there's a decent chance it just won't. Also unique about this section is that it's the only body of water in Ace Race that encourages players not to launch upwards but forwards. That's a bad idea though, and here's why. If you launch upwards, you'll quickly leave the water and therefore not receive much drag. But if you launch forwards, you're receiving drag all the way through. Maybe they should have kept this as the Pride map, because if you launch like that, you're gonna be a drag queen. Or king, or some sort of drag monarch. Anyway, that covers most types of water features found in Ace Race, and all of the types that typically give players trouble. But you can apply what you've learned today to anywhere the trident is found, not just on the current 3 courses, but any future new ones as well. And remember that even though the trident is awkward to use, it's not inconsistent. And while achieving consistency can sometimes be very skill intensive, there are sometimes methods that can be used to make it easier. I've shown you a few, but you can look for some on your own if a section ever gives you trouble. Additionally, even if the trident gets changed, many of these tips will still apply. The Nox crew has mentioned that they are considering changing the tridents, on the admin stream saying that they dislike how bad it is deep underwater. But changing the physics of launching in water wouldn't fix the problems people were having with tridents not firing, for instance. And Nox crew, if you're listening, I have a change I'd like you to make. It's not to do with tridents, but it involves a similar interaction between launching and the drag effect of water. Specifically, it's where you bounce off the slime to transfer from one launch tube to another. It's a very important shortcut, saving multiple seconds if you pull it off, but if your ping is too high, you can't do it. If your ping is too low, guess what? You also can't do it. This could likely be fixed, or at the very least improved, if Dolphin's Grace was enabled for this section. The tubes could be made a bit shorter to compensate. Thanks for listening to my mini rant there, and thanks for watching the video. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.